February 5th, 146 BC. The outskirts of Carthage. Over 260,000 corpses rotted beneath the desert sun, yet the Roman Senate still wasn't satisfied. They ordered the city salted, its name erased, its memory buried beneath ash and shame. But what the military scrolls never recorded was that inside Carthage's crumbling walls, a Roman general's illegitimate child was hidden among the dying. A child born of a 10-year affair with a Carthaginian priestess whose temple had already been burned to the ground. Before we continue, hit subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I read everyone. The day began with screams muffled beneath the grind of siege weapons. Carthage, once queen of the Western Mediterranean, now bled from every gate. Scipio Aemilianus, 36 years old and praised as Rome's rising sword, stood where fire met stone and refused to look away. One division of 4,000 Roman infantry surged into the Bursa district, met by makeshift barricades and Carthaginian citizens wielding kitchen knives, shattered amphorae, and rusted spears scavenged from ancient victories. Steel met terracotta, flesh met fire. Roman pila pierced children's backs. Women threw themselves from rooftops rather than be dragged to the forums as battlefield spoils. And yet, amid the hellfire and rubble, Scipio ordered a single villa spared, a temple converted into home, ash-coated but intact. No legionnaire questioned the command. None dared. Beneath that spared villa's scorched threshold, a girl of 12 clutched a blood-smeared idol to Tanit, the goddess of Carthage's womb and war. Her mother's ashes still clung to her braid. The priestess, 42 at death, highborn, once mistress to a Roman legate turned general, had hidden letters in the base of the altar, inked in Punic and Latin. They spoke of secret rendezvous during truces, of gifts smuggled in olive shipments, of Roman war plans whispered between feverish kisses. Her final letter ended abruptly with the phrase, "If I perish, let our daughter live in illusion, not Rome's mercy." Outside, the city roared with the screams of the burned and the raped. But inside the cellar, a single Roman centurion stood guard, silent, not from loyalty to Scipio, but because he was the child's half-brother. Illegitimate, 19, son of the same man, yet raised in steel, not silk. And he had orders no scroll would ever record. Kill all except her. Leave no witnesses. Burn the room. Spare the girl. Then disappear into the line of march like nothing ever happened. At dusk, when the Roman advance paused to feast on stolen grain and the cries of the dying dulled into smoky silence, one scream rose. A soldier disemboweled near the river gate, his entrails marked with carved Punic letters. Panic surged through the ranks. Scipio's tribunes whispered of Carthaginian witches, of curses sealed in wombs and altars. But high above the shrine, hidden among the eaves of a shattered mosaicked roof, the girl watched through soot-streaked eyes as her half-brother dragged oil barrels to the cellar stairs. She heard him whisper a prayer, not Latin, but Punic, before torch met cask. Fire kissed earth, stone cracked, yet by the time flames consumed the villa, both the guard and the child were gone. Their tracks led east, toward the aqueduct ruins, where deserters vanished and war stories became rumors. Scipio never asked what became of the villa's contents. He simply rode into the forum 2 days later and wept alone amid columns still hot to the touch. The tears? Unrecorded. The girl? Unnamed. But years later, when Roman senators began dying one by one, poisoned at feasts, throats slashed in bathhouses, the whispers returned. Of flame-born daughters, of priestess blood. Of Carthage's last remnant learning how to kill not with armies, but with memory. 3 years later, in 143 BC, Gaius Servilius Glaucia choked on sweet wine laced with black hellebore during Saturnalia, a festival feast meant for joy, not death. He was 50, a powerful senator, and the first Roman to openly call Carthaginian annihilation a mistake. The wine was poured by no known hand. Only a single medallion was left at the scene, pressed into his throat, a faded, scorched coin bearing Tanit's profile. That same week, 2 tribunes who'd marched with Scipio died within hours of each other. One gutted in a latrine, another found nailed to his bedpost. No motive, no thief, no leads, but one consul whispered a name never entered into any official report. Livia Carthago. A name not Latin, a myth. A girl who wasn't registered on any census, who never sat in the triumphs, who Rome forgot on purpose. And yet, she seemed to know where every survivor from Carthage's last breath lived, loved, and bled. Every death was razor clean, puzzling, half Punic ritual, half Roman execution. And as the years darkened, so too did the list of those who shared wine with Scipio's sword. The city had been salted, but vengeance, never. It took root where Rome least expected, in its beds, its baths, its bloodline. In 140 BC, a childless noblewoman named Cornelia Balba was found dead outside the temple of Vesta, her jewelry untouched, her tongue blackened by mandrake root extract, a known Punic aphrodisiac that becomes fatal when boiled too long. Her death was ruled accidental, but just below her ribcage, hidden in a wound stitched clumsily closed, investigators discovered a shard of Carthaginian mosaic tile bearing the glyph for vengeance. Less than a month later, 3 of her former lovers, each involved in provisioning Rome's African campaigns, were found murdered in sequence. The first suffocated in his bath with a silk sash, the second drowned in his own amphora of wine, and the third with his skull split by a Carthaginian falcata, a blade long since banned in Rome. Grain stocks from Africa began going missing. Trade vessels turned up burned. A former Carthaginian slave, 62 years old and blind in one eye, muttered through torture that a daughter walks the night with her mother's prayers in her mouth and her enemies in her hands. When questioned about the name Livia Carthago, Rome's censors burned the record parchment. One archivist slit his own wrists the following evening. Not from fear. He carved Tanit's sigil into his chest before bleeding out. The last line he wrote before death? She's already inside the Senate. By 137 BC, paranoia had diluted into legislation. The Senate passed the silent edicts, anonymous laws purging archives, forbidding mention of Carthage in public forums, and ordering the destruction of any Punic artifact not housed in sanctioned museums. But silence could not smother what had taken root in vengeance. Senator Marcus Attilius Regulus, age 42, who wore ash in his shoes to mourn Carthage as personal penance, was found hanging upside down in the Temple of Concord. His mouth had been stuffed with dried locusts, a punishment once reserved for Carthaginian traitors. A mural painted in blood adorned the wall behind him, Rome devouring its own. Within the same moon cycle, 5 equestrian families involved in African grain contracts reported missing heirs, all male, ages 12 through 20. Last seen attending a lunar banquet where a veiled woman in Carthaginian silks served spiced figs and quoted the Punic Book of Shadows. None were found alive. No legion marched. No torches lit the hilltops. But in the brothels across Subura and the bathhouses beneath Calian Hill, whispers grew louder. Livia Carthago wasn't a woman. She was a legacy, a weapon, a ghost carrying her mother's ashes and her father's lies. And as Rome braced for Eastern wars, it never noticed that the enemy it truly birthed slept inside its own walls, wrapped in incense, silk, and prophecy. The war had ended. The city had fallen. But Carthage's curse had only just begun. In 135 BC, on the anniversary of Carthage's destruction, a fire broke out in the temple of Jupiter Optimus Maximus. Flames licked the sky while priests screamed of divine retribution. Inside the smoldering wreckage, investigators found symbols carved into the altar's foundation, intertwined serpents, ancient Punic, and the words, "You burned us once." Within days, yet another senator died. Decimus Junius Silanus, aged 56, suffocated in his home library, beneath a collapsed shelf filled with Punic histories, long thought destroyed. The only survivor of his household, a kitchen slave, claimed he saw a woman in crimson robes vanish through the smoke. No one believed him. But bivouac reports from legionaries stationed in Numidia told a different story. Female riders of unknown allegiance seen infiltrating supply caravans, whispering curses in guttural Punic, vanishing into olive groves after each commander who had once raised steel against Carthage fell ill or went mad. Scipio Aemilianus himself, the conqueror who wept among the ruins, was found dead in 129 BC at age 56, collapsed in his bed, eyes wide in horror, jaw locked as though mid-scream. No signs of struggle, no poison ever detected, just a last breath whispering ash. And at the foot of his couch, a smear of soot shaped like a mother nursing fire. Rome had erased Carthage from the earth, but in trying to silence it, they had summoned something older, darker, and far more intimate. Memory forged into murder, ritual into wrath. A war fought not with walls, but with whispers. The city was gone, but vengeance wore perfume now, and knew every Roman by name. In the year 132 BC, Rome praised itself as unassailable, but under its marble skin, the rot spread. A minor patrician named Lucius Pulcher, age 34, was found nailed to a tree outside the city walls, his eyes gouged and his stomach stuffed with ash and barley. A crude statue of Tanit was set at his feet, mouth sewn shut with bronze wire. Months later, the Vestal Virgin Licinia, just 19, vanished from her guarded chambers. Her blood-soaked veil was discovered inside the Cloaca Maxima. Oracle scribes muttered of sacrilege and sex rites, but the truth whispered deeper. Licinia had confided her affair with a woman dressed in flame to a temple slave a week before. Every whisper pointed to Livia Carthago, immortalized, perhaps imagined, but now etched into memory like poison into skin. No funerals were held, no trials were opened, but senators no longer drank freely, Vestals no longer walked alone, and when a new temple to Mars was built on the ashes of a Punic relic site, its cornerstone cracked the very day it was sealed. Rome was haunted, not by ghosts but by guilt, crimes layered in conquest, and by a daughter who inherited war and made it seductive. Erased cities don't stay buried. Sometimes they rise, one body at a time. By 130 BC, the deaths stopped making sense, not in method, not in motive. The city blamed slaves, mercenaries, even exiled sorcerers from the east. But beneath the marble of the Curia Hostilia, in whispered conclaves held behind locked bronze doors, old men remembered fire. They remembered ash. And some began to suspect what their pride would not allow, that the true assassin had never left, that she had stopped killing senators and priests not because she was gone, but because she had achieved something far more scandalous: power. In late autumn, a grain contract scandal erupted. Over 10,000 sesterces vanished, with falsified ledgers bearing signatures of 3 senators long presumed dead. One of the adult scribes responsible fled toward Ostia, only to be found mute and trembling beneath a statue of Ceres, his tongue cut out and replaced with a scrap of mosaic tile. Scholars translated the glyph, "We do not forget." That winter, a senator's new wife missed her wedding night. Her chamber was strewn with perfumed herbs and Punic scrolls beneath the mattress. One handmaiden remembered a phrase whispered by the pale, veiled bride. "I loved him for burning my people. I married him to burn his name." Carthage no longer needed soldiers. It had learned to seduce Rome to death. The war never ended. It changed shape. And on Rome's highest hills, where temples reached for heaven, a new prayer rose, unanswered, but trembling. Who else had laid with the fire? Whose children bore smoke in their lungs and rage in their veins? And who would be the last Roman to die without knowing why? By 128 BC, Rome's shadow loomed paranoid, and the Forum stank of incense and fear. The Senate erected new laws designed to crush ghosts with bureaucracy. Punic tongues were outlawed even in private prayer. The names of the dead, even speaking Carthage, was now treasonous in some provinces. But in a villa on Aventine Hill, a boy aged 12 painted secret symbols on parchment with his fingers. Ash and wine mixed into ancient glyphs his mother hummed to him in lullabies. His father was a Roman magistrate, proud and cruel. His mother, no records, no lineage, no claim to dowry, but in the boy's curls clung the scent of myrrh, and in his silence, an inherited hunger. That spring, 21 senators absented themselves permanently. Most vanished, a few found with their stomachs packed with salt and sand. Rome called it madness, pestilence, the punishment of indulgent gods. But every survivor of Scipio's campaign now lived behind guards, iron-bolted doors, or had fled the capital entirely. They feared no army, only the daughter who bore none of Rome's titles, only its ruin. She never needed to conquer the empire. She did something worse. She made Rome remember what it tried to forget. A city that bled for a century, whose ashes now breathed through her lips. She was not legend. She was inheritance. And when the wind howled over the crushed fields where Carthage once stood, the voices did not mourn. They whispered, "Count them. Count the Romans who died with Punic names pressed between their teeth." By 125 BC, even Rome's gods grew wary. Their temples cracked with quiet accusation. Augurs read entrails and saw only flame. The Sibylline books were consulted in secret, and for the first time in half a century, an offering was made not to Rome's pantheon, but to a goddess long stripped from every codex, Tanit. Her name was carved into fruit left to rot in the Senate courtyard, each one filled with ash and honey, a ritual for both death and sweetness. That summer, Scipio's lineage ceased entirely. His last living descendant, Marcus Aemilius, 23, and sworn to avenge his grandfather's ghost, vanished during transit to Hispania. All that returned was his severed ring finger, wrapped in silk stained the color of dried blood and bearing a single word: remember. No tomb was built, no name etched, and in the coastal slums of Ostia, children began humming a lullaby no Roman mother had taught. Its rhythm foreign, its words full of fire and loss, of daughters born in ash singing vengeance into the wind. Carthage had died in flames, but in killing her, Rome had given her a daughter. And that daughter had become the kind of war even empires could not conquer, one waged not for land, but memory. not for gold, but blood. Not to win, but to never be forgotten. And so the shadows deepened, not over battlefields or palaces, but over Rome's very breath. By 123 BC, the Senate, now brittle with fear, commissioned the burning of all Punic remnants in private collections. 12 homes were set ablaze, 31 were confiscated. But even as flames consumed parchment and painted idols, a new rumor flared, of a Punic priesthood reborn, not in temples, but in bloodlines. The crimson-clad daughters now married into patrician households, trained not to fight, but to remember. Not to speak, but to sing lullabies rich with vengeance. They bore no weapons, yet carried in their whispers every war Rome believed it had won. The eternal city, crowned in marble and myth, found itself hunted not from across the sea, but across its own sheets and halls. Carthage's pyre had been lit in conquest, but its embers lived on in womb, kiss, and curse. Rome had sought to erase a city. Instead, it carved her name deeper with every denial, and in the silent mouths of forgotten children, in the terror behind every senatorial mask, Carthage endured. Ghost, goddess, girl. Not in history books, but in the horror of remembrance Rome dared never name aloud. In murder, in myth, in memory. That was the true salting of Carthage, not the soil, but the soul of its killer. And the earth still tastes of it. By 121 BC, a Senate decree ordered the complete removal of any surviving Carthaginian iconography from coinage and public spaces. Yet days later, a denarius surfaced in the marketplace depicting a veiled female figure cradling the ruins of Bursa Hill. It was flawless, freshly struck, and disappeared minutes later into the sleeve of a merchant who would be found hanged by sundown, his tongue replaced with a dried fig. Rome scrambled, silencing rumors, executing forgers, banning mint access to all but military auditors. But the truth had circulated, pressed not in silver, but story. Livia Carthago, whether woman, weapon, or whispered vengeance, had become Rome's forbidden hymn. No law could strangle her legend. No fire could cauterize her reach. Carthage's tomb had roared in flame, but her daughter buried Rome slowly, one breath at a time. In forums, they feared her shadow. In bedrooms, they dreamed her touch. And in the silence between Senate debates, a single truth clung like incense to stone. You can burn a city, but not the vengeance of its ghosts. And so, in the final flicker of the 2nd century's first quarter, Rome met its most intimate reckoning, not by sword or Senate decree, but through the quiet terror of inherited guilt. In 120 BC, as lightning split the sky above the Capitoline Hill and struck the library roof, a single scroll survived. It bore no title, no author, just a thread-bound vellum etched in both Punic and Latin, sealed with wax marked by a serpent devouring its tail. It told of altars burned, wombs cleansed in ash, kisses laced with poison, and bloodlines twisted into vengeance. It ended with 7 names, all Roman, all dead, followed by a final phrase scrawled in what scholars would later swear smelled not of ink but myrrh. Erased is not forgotten. The scroll was never seen again. The librarian who found it vanished the same night, last heard humming a foreign lullaby to the full moon. Some say the girl from Bursa lived forever, changing her name with every century, her vengeance patient, her memory immortal. Others believe she died nameless beneath Aventine vines, her war complete. But the records fell silent, the murders ceased, the scandal smeared into whispers, and Rome, wounded but defiant, pressed on. Yet every time fire touched parchment, every time salt scattered in ceremony, the wind would carry a scent not of death, but of perfume and prophecy. Livia Carthago had no tomb. She needed none. Because some cities are not erased by flame. They continue inside us. And when memory itself becomes the blade, even marble burns. That year, they said the Tiber ran darker. Not with rain, but memory. By winter's end, every surviving veteran of the Third Punic War was dead, none by war's hand. An aged centurion was found in his orchard, heart punctured by a handmade pin of Carthaginian bronze. A former tribune drowned in his own reflecting pool, his body positioned in silent supplication, facing east. And in the depths of the temple of Janus, where peace was once sealed with iron doors, a forgotten chamber was uncovered. 27 Punic dolls arranged in a circle, each stitched with Roman names, each soaked with vermilion dye. No entrance, no footprint. Just one message engraved on the wall above them, in a language Rome had died trying to erase. Her ashes are our altar now. The Senate claimed rhetoric. Priests screamed heresy. But neither could stop the chill threading through the empire's veins. Carthage had burned. Its stone was scattered. Its name purged from the tongues of children. And yet, the fire breathed still. In daughters who kissed Rome's sons. In sons who dreamed of gods with foreign names. In a silence so complete it rang louder than triumph. Some wars end with treaties, others with tombs. But this one ended within the heart of Rome itself, still beating, still burning, still afraid to say her name aloud. Not even emperors could outpace a curse carried in womb and whisper. In 119 BC, a marble tablet meant to commemorate a new aqueduct revealed, when polished by light, a ghostly inscription beneath the official one. Carthage remembers. The engineer swore he had used fresh stone, not one salvaged from Punic ruins. By midsummer, he was dead, his body found arched backward over the aqueduct's flowgate, throat cut ear to ear, lips sealed with embalming wax. Rome raged, but quietly. Too many officials now ordered mosaics removed for structural defects. Too many husbands woke screaming of women with smoke for eyes. The Senate continued its work. Laws were passed. Legions deployed. But beneath their pomp beat a tremor not from rebellion, but reckoning. The daughter of Ash had never raised a sword, only questions. Who built empires on bodies? Who kissed their enemies in silk sheets? Who remembered when others demanded forgetting? Rome never answered, because Rome no longer knew where forgetting ended and punishment began. Carthage was gone, but her vengeance outlived the empire that killed her, in temple shadow, in senate breath, in every child who ever asked why a city was salted, not mourned. And for centuries after, when fires crackled too loudly or fig trees split without warning, Romans looked east and said nothing. For in the end, Rome did not simply destroy Carthage. It awakened something far deeper than a city in flame. It woke memory sharp as steel and tender as a mother's dying breath. A vengeance not born in armies, but in children lullabied by smoke. Whether Livia Carthago lived or never was, it no longer mattered. Her story had already fused with Rome's bones. Statues wept when no rain fell. Senators choked on words buried too long. And long after the scrolls stopped, when empire turned to dust and marble cracked beneath centuries of silent guilt, the wind still carried her name. Not as a curse, not as a whisper, but as a prayer, a dangerous one that reminded the world what Rome tried to forget. You can salt the earth, burn the city, silence the voice. But you cannot kill the daughter born inside the fire. And when history grows quiet, when libraries darken and tongues fall still, the story breathes once more, in perfume, in blood, in memory. Carthage did not die. It waits, behind eyelids, beneath marble, beyond forgetting. They tell us history is written by the victors. But what if the victors rot from within? What if the last scream of a murdered city is not silence but story? Rome claimed Carthage was gone, yet every senator who trembled at shadows, every lover who tasted ash on a kiss, every child who drew swirling glyphs no Latin teacher could decipher, they knew. Fire feeds roots sometimes. Salt does not erase, it preserves. And so as Rome faded, as emperors bowed to time and legions scattered into myth, one name still lingered in half-hushed prayers and blood-stained lullabies. Not Scipio nor Caesar, but hers. Livia Carthago. No tomb, no triumph, only a wound that never closed. The city fell, the empire crumbled, but vengeance became eternal. And so the tale ends, not in triumphant battle nor in solemn decree, but in silence thick with grief and flame. Rome salted the soil where Carthage once stood, scorched every stone, and damned every name. But in doing so, it sowed its own undoing. The war did not end in 146 BC. It became something else. A myth, a memory, a woman impossible to kill. Livia Carthago, if she was ever just one, became 1,000 voices, 100 daughters, a single vengeance dressed in silk and shadow. Cities can fall, empires collapse. But some fires remain, burning not in fields or temples, but in the hearts of those taught never to forget. Rome died slowly, crumbling not from enemies abroad, but from the one it had already buried beneath salt and silence. And if you stand upon the ruins of Carthage today, with no stone inscribed, no curse intact, listen, not for ghosts, but for the heartbeat of a story never meant to survive. It still murmurs in the dust. A city died, a daughter lived. And history, ever arrogant, dared call that victory.